Hi, we're here. A little bit late, but we're here. We were trying to use Streamlabs like came out with like a collab cam and I was like, "Ooh, like what if we use that?" And then it didn't work, and so that's why we're late. Anyway,
Not
sorry.
not ideal. We're here. We're
We're
good.
here. Thank you, Google Meet. Except Google Meet has started being like paid. Like they like cut off when your meeting or how long your meetings can last. And if that happens, we'll just end the meeting and start a new one.
Yeah. Next time we should use Zoom. I have like a paid
Oh.
Zoom, so
Oh, do
we
you
could like
really?
last forever. Yeah, we get it through work.
All right. Everyone's saying you're quiet. How is Alex now, y'all?
Oh, hello, everybody. Check
You
1 2.
you would be quiet because I normally put the desktop audio on super quiet. I forgot to do that. So,
Hmm.
all
I
right.
just thought you thought I was a really loud person.
No problem, Grat.
Oh.
Hope that your eyes do better. Okay. All right.
Um,
Hi. A little later tonight, but that's because we are hanging out with Alex tonight. I know you've been here
Woo!
before, Alex, but do you want to tell them about you if they don't know you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Alex. Hello. I also stream on Twitch, doing the software stuff. I am a senior developer and a project lead at Kirschbaum. We build a lot of Laravel apps. If you don't know what Laravel is, it's a PHP framework that is so good. And then on stream, we just build a bunch of random crap. I mean, it's just kind of whatever we're feeling. Right now, rebuilding my personal website in Next.js and React, which has been an adventure, but we could talk about that at a different time. I love corgis. I have one of my own. She's right here. If she wasn't asleep, I would pick her up and show her on camera. But if she wakes up, we might have a corgi appearance. Yeah, I live in South Carolina. It's perpetually very hot here, and yeah, I'm just happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. It was a lot of fun having you here last time. It was an
Yeah,
interesting task, but it was a lot of fun.
yeah. I still talk about that. Like people, gosh, I literally brought it up in a meeting. Must have been like yesterday or Friday. I guess it would have been yesterday. It would have been Friday. I was talking to somebody at work, and they're like, "What's the most ridiculous coding challenge you've ever had to do?" And I was like, "Well, I wasn't doing it, but have you ever heard of Othello?" And they're like, "What the heck is Othello?" I was like, "Don't even worry about it. It was just ridiculous all over the place."
Share the
So that was.
trauma.
I couldn't believe. I still can't believe that that was even a thing.
Did you
But
hear about what happened after that?
no. Well, I saw. Okay, so I saw Twitter did that thing where like it loaded, and I saw a tweet, and then it went, and I never saw it again. So
Mm. Yeah,
what happened?
so I showed up at the interview and we had worked through a lot of it and they're like, "Okay, so we coded the whole setup and now we want you to code the logic of the game and we're going to leave you alone for an hour and then we'll get back and talk about your code."
Okay.
And I was like,
Well,
"No, no. What we did was the setup." And
right.
yeah, it was not good. It was probably my worst interview and like the one I prepared the most for, so that's fine. That's fine.
That's so frustrating. That's just like I have a lot of thoughts about doing coding challenges like that. Um, I'll zip, but yeah, that's just kind of strange to me. I don't know. I find that very odd. Also, I'm looking over here because I'm keeping an eye on chat and trying to host
That's
you while I'm
fine.
talking. So don't worry about me not paying
No
attention.
worries.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. I'm always just like, listen, like
Listen,
why?
Linda.
Like no one like if your job was going to be programming that stupid game every day, then sure, I could see that being useful. But otherwise, that is completely not even a little bit indicative of how you would do in the real job, you know?
And I like how it like spurred uh Peter decided to do it on their stream as well and then just like it like had a
Mhm.
little like Othello effect and the trauma
Well,
got
it's so
shared.
wild. Nobody has ever heard of this game. Like what we
Mm,
had like one or two people in chat that were like, "Oh yeah, I've played Othello. It's super fun." And I'm sure it would be super fun, not programming it though.
right. Or I don't know if it would be fun now, that we tried to
Well, yeah,
program
that's
it.
probably true.
Because we'd be like, how dare it? How dare this logic even? I don't know.
Right? Yeah, no, I hear you. Oh my gosh. That just so unbelievably frustrating.
And like I guess they were it was like kind of like a terminal, but it was like slightly different. I don't know.
Oh, really? Wait,
Yeah.
did they not like just let you code in whatever you wanted to?
No, they
Like
had a
VS Code or
special
anything?
environment. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then like all the code was like really old JavaScript, and I was like, I don't know how to use classes, which is my bad, but
I mean, is it though? Because like it's JavaScript. I'm gonna be honest. Like, mm,
I get that. I get that. But I mean,
or
it's the only one I know for now. But in the future, maybe
yeah.
we'll do a Laravel co-stream.
Hey, don't tempt me with a good time. I would love that. I Laravel's so much fun. It's so much fun. Um, I don't know. I think you would love it.
Well, probably. But tonight, we're doing Agile. So I
Woo!
asked Alex if they wanted to co-stream, and I was like, "Here's a bunch of things that I know nothing about." And I keep like I don't know if I applied for a job, but I was considered for a job that said someone was an Agile developer, and I was like, I don't know. So I figured I should know what that was, and Alex says they use it every day. So
Oh yeah.
what better person to tell us about Agile?
Well, yeah. So, where do you want to start? You want to start at like what we used to do before Agile?
No. I want to start at what is it like big picture? Like cuz I don't even know what it is. I think it's like a methodology or something about like a working environment process, and that's about all I know. I don't know like the basic of like what it is.
Yeah. So I mean, you pretty much got the basics, right?
Oh, did I? Wow.
Yeah. The important part about Agile is that it's iterative. So you do things over and over and over and over again in a loop.
Okay.
Um, how that happens differs because a lot of agile methodologies, there's extreme programming and there's Kanban, there's Scrum, there's a mixture of a whole bunch of them. And there's some that I've literally never heard of because I looked up a graph or a chart, like a pie chart of all the different agile things. And like 10 of them, I was like, I literally have never heard of these. And they're used by like 2% of people. So, um, but yeah, at the end of the day, it's basically a way for programmers and development teams to get working software to users and to their clients as quickly and as regularly as possible. How that's done can differ. Like I said, methodology to methodology, they things can change. Um, but the reason why Agile came around was a little bit because it's important to get software out to market early. There's
Right.
the idea of testing your hypotheses when you're building software. Because if you like, oh man, this feature would be really cool, and you spend, I don't know, 6 months building it and you release it and users are like, yeah, this sucks. You just wasted 6 months. Like that's not super great. But if you can make like an MVP, a minimum viable product, and get it out in 2 weeks, you can really quickly validate whether or not this was a good idea. So it came out for that, but really it came out as a result of the eternal struggle between developers and stakeholders. So people who have stake in the project you're building. Because before Agile, we used to use something called the waterfall method, which is where you would like do all of your requirements gathering, and then you would do all of the design, and then you do all of the development, and then you would release it, and that's it. So if you were halfway through the design process and someone wanted to add requirements, you couldn't do it. Or if you did, it was going to light everybody's hair on fire to try to go back through those stages really quick. So the idea of the waterfall is that once you fall down to the next layer, you can't go back up. And that was frustrating for a lot of people because what ended up happening is companies would have these big requirements documents. I mean, big requirements documents that would get sent over to their clients or to, the stakeholders of the company if they were building a SaaS product or something. And those people have to sign off on those requirements. And once those requirements were signed off on, the product couldn't change. And so if you're doing this development for a year and a half, 2 years, and the product can't change, a lot of things happen in a year and a half, or 2 years. So by the time the product was launched, it just wasn't as viable anymore. The market wasn't the same. So with Agile, what you do is you take these iterations, and within an iteration, typically this can change, and we'll talk about that a little bit, but typically within an iteration, your tasks stay the same, but those iterations are typically relatively short. So that way requirements and features and bug fixes can come in and not just throw the whole development team into chaos. Like you can just wrap those up in your next iteration and get those out really quickly.
Okay. So if I understand so far, used to be
Mm-hmm.
that like it was like stage based where like you would do design and development and things like that. And then it
Mm-hmm.
that made it less flexible and yeah, less flexible. But the difference with
Mm-hmm.
Agile is that you do the MVP and then you just are improving on it repeatedly.
Yeah, pretty much, pretty much. A way that I like to explain it and why I always like to talk about waterfall when we're talking about agile is because waterfall, like I actually wrote them down. There's like specific steps. Yes, there's requirements gathering, analysis of the requirements, design, coding, testing, deploying, and then maintaining. So just doing bug fixes and stuff after launch. So there's 7 steps officially. Obviously, that can change, but ideally there's 7 steps. And like you said, you do each one of those steps. And once you finish requirements gathering, you will not go back and gather any more requirements. Once you finish design, you will not go back and design anything else. Like the design is locked in, which also becomes a problem when you have overzealous designers who design things that just aren't possible, like say on the web, right? Um, Agile takes those 7-ish steps and you just do all of them on every iteration for every feature you're doing, right? So that's the ideal. So that doesn't always happen, but instead of doing one big waterfall, you do like lots of little waterfalls over and over and over again, with the idea that at the end of every iteration, you review and say like what went well, what didn't go well, and then you can tweak and adjust the next iteration based on that feedback. And I'm using the word iteration because that's about as abstract as it can get, because once we actually break into the different ways to do agile, what an iteration is can just vary so widely. But essentially that's the idea, right? Within an iteration, you're going through the entire software development cycle for a feature or for a bug or just for an experiment. We call them a spike. Um, so
Okay.
yeah,
A
yeah,
spike.
yeah.
Blackboard wants to know if Trello counts as an agile tool.
So it's funny you say that because I actually pulled up Trello right before as like an example, and literally I pulled it up and it was like, here are some suggested templates, and one of them is Kanban, and one of them is what's called an Agile Sprint Board or Scrum, and those are the two kinds of agile development that I've worked with that I figured we could talk about. So yes, Trello is a very good tool for agile development. Jira is also a good one as well. It's owned, so Trello and Jira are actually owned by the same company, Atlassian.
Mm.
Jira is very enterprisey and kind of slow and bloated and not my favorite tool in the world, but we actually use it for a couple projects at work, and it's fine. Like it's fine. There's better stuff out there, but Trello is a fantastic way to get in and just have simple like boards of things, of columns, because when you break down agile and you actually start using tools for it, more often than not it comes down to here's columns with tasks in them and you move them across columns. So anything, and you could even do it in Notion. Obsidian has a plugin. So I use Obsidian to take my notes as a plugin for I think specifically Kanban boards, which are just Trello boards. um, it's less about what the thing looks like and more about how you use it. um, because you could do agile development in just about any project management software. Some just make it easier than others.
Huh. So it doesn't have to use any like particular software. Like you could kind of like get it to work by yourself, but it's just like the process.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, one of the ways people recommend starting agile development, like if you're on a team that isn't a part of it or you're just doing it yourself, obviously you have to be all in the same place for this. But one of the ways people recommend is just make a physical board. Like people will draw up on a whiteboard just a bunch of columns, and they'll take sticky notes and write their tasks on there and put the sticky notes on the board and literally physically move them across the board as they're doing things. Because it gives you a really good idea of like, we are physically actually doing work right now. The software ones are great if you're a distributed team or if you've done an agile method once or twice, because you know what to expect. You don't need that actual feedback of picking up a card and moving it. But I mean, people even like, I've seen people use masking tape like on a section of their desk and literally just tape off like like little columns and stuff, and
Hmm.
move these sticky notes or index cards across. But it all works. You can do it on a scrap sheet of paper if you wanted to. It doesn't really matter.
So how do you determine when like an iteration is done?
So that term, or that's really heavily reliant on what kind of agile development you do. So there are a lot of companies that want to be hip and cool and go, we do agile development. And you go, oh, okay, like what methodology do they use or do you use? And they go, we use agile. Doesn't tell you anything, right? That's like saying, yep. Someone's like, what kind of computer do you use? Like one with a keyboard. It's like, okay, great. Like that's fantastic. But like, what kind of computer do you use? You're going to want, people really need to know what kind of methodology they're going to use, because if that's how you determine what the iterations are like. So iterations can be anything from like the time it takes to do one task to a set time of like 2 to 4 weeks. And we can dive into Kanban and Scrum if you want. I think that's the more useful knowledge than just knowing kind of what Agile is. But each of those have different iteration lengths. But more often than not, it's determined by the team. So an important part of Agile is that the teams are what are called self-organizing. Basically, there's no manager overseeing like this has to be done by this date, or okay, now you're going to do this task, now you're going to do this task. The teams have to take accountability for the work that needs to be done and all agree on the system that they're using. Because if you have somebody who's like, everyone's like, yeah, we like Scrum, and there's one guy who's like, I hate Scrum, it's not going to be a good time, because that one guy's not going to follow the rules of agile development, and it's going to make things kind of tricky.
Mm. Dakota wants to know if sprints tie into this.
Yeah, so sprints are a part of the Scrum methodology. So yeah, so if you do sprints, or if you've heard of sprints, that's Scrum. And some people really love Scrum. Some people really don't love Scrum. I think it's less of how the methodology works and more of how people do it. Because I actually just saw one come in. For the life of me, I can't actually read the color. So sorry, person below Dakota. But yeah, it basically every company implements their own version, even though very specifically Scrum says you have to do it this way, otherwise it's not Scrum. Like that is like for whatever reason, Scrum is just very structured. Like you have to do this, and then you have to do this, and you have to have the magical Scrum wizard or whatever they're called come down from heaven and bless the sprint or whatever it is, with all these very specific rules. But nobody really does that.
Is
I shouldn't say nobody. There are people who do, but like,
is Scrum an organization, or is it just like who what lords of Scrum are saying these things, you know?
So the Scrum methodology was created by people who I honestly don't know. It's actually really never been that important for me to know who, but somebody invented Scrum. There's like a whole Scrum manual. Actually, I might even have the link. I can drop it in chat, but yeah, there is like a whole not book, but like a whole website on like how do you do this thing, and you have to follow the Scrum manual to the T, or Scrum guide, excuse me. You follow the Scrum guide to the T, otherwise, it's not Scrum or whatever. Here we go. Yep, that's the one. So that's the Scrum guide. If you ever want to look up the entirety of Scrum, this is only the 2020 Scrum guide though, so there may be a newer one, but as far as I know, Scrum is really the only agile methodology that's like so strict about what needs to happen. The other ones are pretty loose. Kanban is actually not only very loose, it's intentionally loose because it's meant to fit into your organization or your own personal like project management without having to change much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Blackboard says, makes me wonder how many people actually follow Scrum. At their job, they have tickets that they work on, but it's kind of a free-for-all. Although it is important to note they're a 2-year startup with a small size of employees.
So I don't obviously know the inner workings of that. But if you don't have what are called sprint retros or sprint planning meetings, or even just sprints, you might be using Kanban because they kind of look the same. Now, people have decided they love the idea of sprints, right? Like we deliver after 2 weeks, but we don't love the idea of magical sprint wizard or whatever they're called from Scrum, moving the cards and doing all the things. So there's like ScrumBan, which is a combination of the two, or there's one for like Can Scrum or something like that too. But it's basically it's kind of a free for all with tickets. But you're saying, hey, for these 2 weeks, we're going to work on this list of tickets. Grab whatever you want. A lot of people use that.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
Blackboard mentioned like stand-ups. That's a Scrum thing, or not? That's an Agile thing too.
Yep. So stand-ups are typically pretty important because, and actually they're required in Scrum, because that way they basically every morning you have like a quick 5 to 10 minute meeting where everybody in the team says, here's what I worked on yesterday. Here's what I'm working on today. And if you have any blockers, like who is blocking me? So yeah, I'm supposed to make the user profile page today, but I can't because I don't have the designs yet. Right. That's a blocker. Because the idea of Scrum is to have a consistent, um, I won't say consistent effort, but you're supposed to like be knocking down a specific number of tasks throughout the entire time you're doing it to have a kind of a nice, what's called burn down chart, where the line goes from top left, which is everything still needs to be done, all the way to ideally bottom right, where it's, over the length of time, x-axis time, y-axis number of things to finish. Over the length of time, we have finished all these tasks. And if people are getting blocked, you can have these chunks of time, sometimes days, where no tasks get done because someone's blocked. And then all of a sudden, like 3 tasks get done. At the end of the day, all the tasks typically get done. But people like to have that nice smooth line.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Why? Like, okay, wait a second. My computer just went funky.
Oh no.
Wait a second.
Come on, computer.
Whoa, 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 whoa. I'm surprised you haven't disappeared yet because, like, I totally just moved around the windows on my screen, so it's fine. But that is a good thing. That bodes well for. Okay, look, it changed a little bit. That's fine. Okay,
Oh, hi,
okay.
I'm very large now.
Yes. There
Perfect.
we go.
We're not scuffed. We're not scuffed yet.
Okay. Sorry. Um, we got some questions
Wow.
coming in here. Garth wants to know how new hires are taught these methodologies. Are they given links or resources, or does someone on the team teach that?
So it varies from team to team. Were it me, so I'm a big advocate of mentorship. Big advocate of mentorship. We should talk about that sometime. That'd be kind of fun. If it were me bringing somebody onto a team, they would get a mentor as they onboarded to the company, and that mentor would walk them through all of the company protocols, including how development works. How does the development cycle work? Some companies just kind of like line you up at the edge of the pool and kick you in the deep end and say good luck. That's usually I hate this phrase, but it's usually a company culture kind of thing. So yeah, there's not really one specific way to do it. Ideally, you have somebody show you what to do, or if you're a developer who's used Scrum before, the nice thing about it having such strict rules is that it's always the same, ideally. And Kanban, like we kind of said, it's kind of a free-for-all, so it doesn't really matter as long as you are like grabbing a ticket and doing it. And it takes like 10 seconds to describe once the workflow is in place. It's just hard to grasp if you've never done it before. It's why we're taking like extra time to go over the details of it.
Boulangerie says, is Kanban just a visualization of task progression?
So actually, yeah, that might actually be the literal best way to say it. So fantastic job with that. The whole point of Kanban is actually to visualize tasks in progress and like being worked on. So Kanban actually comes from Toyota, like the car manufacturer. There's a guy whose name I'm not going to remember, but basically he was one of the folks who was heading up the operations at the Toyota factory in Japan. And he was walking around a United States grocery store one day and realized that when the grocery store workers were working at the store, the folks who walk up and down the aisles, they only stocked things when they saw that the shelves were almost empty, right? So if all of the potato chips were almost gone, they would go stock potato chips. They weren't like walking down the aisles, be like, oh, there's only one box of crackers gone. Here's another one. They would wait until there was a visual indicator. And so this guy brought that idea back to the Toyota factory in Japan, where they put colored index cards at the bottom of all the buckets of bolts and screws and, things like that. And as those bolts were used, you'd start to get some of the index card color revealed through the stuff in the bucket. And then once you started to see the color of the index card, then it was time to order more screws, right? They weren't just ordering screws in a regular interval and just having 5 million extra screws around because they weren't using that many. They waited till there was a visual indicator that, hey, we're almost out of screws. We should do this. And that ended up developing into, well, now every piece, every part that goes on one of these Toyota cars has a physical card with it where the history of that piece or that product was written on the card. And that's one of the important facets of Kanban. Every time something happens to that card, it gets notated in the comments. So when somebody picks up a card, like say, this feature, this user profile feature went all the way through design, and now a developer's picking it up, they'll have all the design notes on the cards. So they have all the context they need right there. And then, like you said, as they're moving across the board, there's a visual indicator of where in the process that particular task is.
Wait,
Tachi Ono, that's the one.
how is there a visual indicator of where it is in the process?
So when I guess it would help to explain what a Kanban board is. So a Kanban board is typically, you know what?
Should we look at one?
Yeah, I was about to say, let me just click on this Kanban template, and you want me to share my screen? Is that difficult? Or here, maybe
if you send me the link, well, but then.
Oh, you know what? This is actually public, so I think I can actually send you the link. So let me just do that. Should I do that in the chat for the meet thing?
Hold up.
Or I can do it on Twitter.
Got your face moving a little bit. Let me look on Twitter.
Okay.
This process needs to like.
There should be an easier way to do this, right?
Yes, there really should be. Okay, but I have Twitter open so I can see. There we go.
Cool. Yeah, so I think that should be public.
Okay, wait a second. Let me just do this. And then there we go. Okay, I got it open.
Sweet. All right. Let me oh gosh. Okay, so this is a very complex, admittedly, Kanban board. So you have backlog, design, to do, doing, code review, testing, and done. Truth be told, on a very basic Kanban board, I would probably just have to do, doing, and done, especially if you're just like doing something yourself. But the idea here is that each one of these little things, you can see like example task with designs. As these tasks, these tickets, these issues, bugs, whatever you want to call them, move from one stage to another, you physically pick up the card, well, virtually pick up the card, and you plop it down to the next column, right? So say let's say someone in design, say I'm a designer, and I'm working on this example task with designs cards under the design column. Once I'm done with that, I can pick that up and drop it over to the to-do column. It's a public template, so I can't actually move it. But I could pick it up and drop it over to the to-do column, where you as a developer would go, okay, I'm free. I'm not currently working on anything. Let's see what's in the to-do column. And you could grab the example task with designs from the to-do column and move it into doing because you're currently working on it. And then when you're done with that, you could plop it over in the code review column because you're ready for it to be code reviewed. And so that's the visual indicator of where things are in the process. Again, this is a really complex board. I would usually just have like to do, doing, and done, and maybe a code review one, just depending on if you're working on a team or by yourself. But the idea is as you are freed up, like as you're not doing anything, you look to the left and you grab a card and see if you can move it to the right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like an assembly line, sort of?
Came out of Toyota.
So is it literally like an assembly line? Is that what that was happening at Toyota?
Basically, yeah. So there was already the assembly line. So they already had these discrete columns or statuses, if you will. So you had like assembly. You'd have what is it called? Like manufacturing, assembly, painting, final assembly, or delivered or something like that. And as different departments were going to work on different pieces, would hypothetically grab this card and move it to the next one. But really that's moving it from one line to the next line.
Okay. And so this is just one. So this is Kanban.
Yes, this is Kanban.
That's how you say it, Kanban.
I think so. I'm going to be honest, I don't really know. Some people say Kanban, but that just sounds wrong.
Maybe it's like SQL or SQL. Maybe it's like people have preferences, but it's like ambiguous,
Yeah, I I couldn't tell you. I wish I could, but I'm not in any way intelligent about Japanese pronunciations of things. So
Oh, it's Japanese. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
yeah,
So this is Kanban, and then
yes,
there's Scrum.
yeah. So Scrum is slightly well, it's pretty different. So in Kanban, everyone is kind of empowered to take this leadership role because you, when you are freed up from doing work, you look to the left and see what work you can do. And when you take a card and you move it over, we call it the point of commitment. Like you have committed to finish that card. And then there's the point of delivery, which is when you move it into the done column. There's a whole discussion on what the definition of done is that we can talk about later. But for right now, just whatever you assume done is, right? When the thing is done, you have delivered. It's the point of delivery. Scrum, however, is quite different. So in Scrum, what you do is you end up with a backlog of tasks. So a backlog of tickets. There's actually a backlog on this Kanban board, which makes it not really Kanban. It's closer to ScrumBan at this point. But from that backlog board, at the beginning of your sprint, which is a predetermined and agreed upon interval of time, usually sometime between 2 and 4 weeks. So you say like, August 1st through August 14th would be your 2 week sprint. Um, at the beginning of the sprint, first thing you do before doing any work is you have a sprint planning meeting where you decide what items from the backlog you want to commit to having done that sprint. So in Kanban, where the point of commitment is when you pick up whatever card and slap it down in the doing column, the point of commitment in Scrum is when the team gets together and agrees these are the 10 cards we're going to work on for this sprint. In order to do that, you estimate how difficult a card is. So you don't estimate the time it's going to take. You estimate how difficult it is using some arbitrary pointing system. Some people will use numbers, will use letters. Some people will specifically use like Fibonacci numbers, right? Like 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, so on and so on. Some people use powers of 2 because they're programmers, and that's a fun thing to do, I guess. But the lower the number, the easier the card. And the idea is over time, you figure out how many points you can handle as a team in a given sprint. But for the first couple, it's just guessing. You're just straight up guessing how many cards you can finish. And the goal is by the end of the sprint, all the cards should be done. So once the sprint planning meeting is done, you kick off the sprint. And then for 2 weeks, you work through all of the cards that you had planned to do that sprint. You have daily stand-ups to make sure everybody's on track. Same thing with Kanban, though. You're picking up the cards and moving them across the board. You don't always have to, but that's typically how you see it done. Then at the end of the sprint, we have 2 meetings. So you have a meeting with the stakeholders where you actually demonstrate what has been done, because the goal is at the end of every sprint, you have a working piece of software you can deliver that people can start using. After you present it to your stakeholders, you have a team retrospective, which is where you then discuss what went well, what went poorly, what can we change to do better next time. And then it starts all over again on the first day of the sprint.
So the difference between Kanban and Scrum is that Kanban is more like, woo, like let's just put things on there as they come, and then as much as we get done in these 2 weeks or however long, it's chill. No.
It's yes, except there is no like 2 weeks. Like it's kind of just continuous. So
Oh,
Kanban is continuous delivery. So basically every time you put something, this is why the definition of done is kind of important. Whenever you put something in the done column, that typically means like it's in production, like it's ready to go. So instead of saying like we're going to wait 2 weeks to batch all this stuff up and release it, you are just like, hey, user profile, doing it. It's in code review. It's launched. And you just kind of keep going. There is no like we're going to meet every 2 weeks and examine our process and anything like that. It's just kind of continuously flowing, whereas Scrum is very time boxed.
so Scrum has sprints, Kanban doesn't.
Right. Yep.
Okay. So,
Again,
sorry.
typically people tend to merge the two. So
Okay. So
yeah.
Scrum, like, so, it, just see if I was like listening or if I understood
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So if this were Scrum, we'd be like, okay, we're gonna do a sprint thingamajigger, and we're gonna try and do 30 tickets, right?
Yep.
And then
Sure.
at
Yep.
the end of it, they're like, all right, we only did 25. next time we'll do 25?
Yeah, exactly. And the idea is over time, you end up honing in on exactly how many, not necessarily tickets, but points, but tickets your team can do. And so that way you end up with a sprint succeeding when you've done all of the tickets by that last day of the sprint.
Oh,
Because if you don't do all those tickets, it's not, that means there's not necessarily a full piece of software that can be delivered at the end of your sprint.
okay.
Yeah.
And so you can like fail sprints then?
Yeah. And so this, I'll let my personal opinions out for a second. This is why I'm not a huge fan of Scrum. Um, because if you don't complete all the cards or all the tickets or whatever during your sprint, it's considered a failed sprint. Um, and that means you aren't necessarily going to release a piece of software because the sprint failed. Ideally, as you go through it, like you're going to start off and you're going to have failed sprints just because you don't know, right? You just don't know how to estimate things at the beginning of a new project, or when you start to form this team, you just don't know, and that's okay. But as you go along, the idea is you'll be able to deliver and succeed at the end of every sprint. However, estimating stuff in software is an unbelievably difficult thing. Um, very, very, very hard. I like Kanban because I love the idea of continuous delivery. I love that like we can say like, hey, this is when this ticket is due, or this is how long we think it's going to take, and try to stick to that. And there's ways to monitor that too. But it's not like, okay, we didn't succeed our sprint. Now we can't launch anything. You're basically launching every piece you move across the board.
So wait, if you have a failed sprint, then would you not launch?
Well, it depends. So typically when you pick all of the features for a sprint, they all are related in some way. And the idea is you want to launch that piece at the end. If we were to finish, let's say we had 10 tickets for a sprint and we finished 8 of them, if those 8 could be reasonably packaged into a software release, I would definitely release that. But in technicality, you have failed the sprint and you should go back and reevaluate, and not necessarily launch. But sometimes you have, all 10 of those tickets are needed to launch the user profile. And if you only have 8, you just can't launch it. Now that doesn't mean that somebody slacked off, or it doesn't mean that things went horribly wrong. Sometimes it just means that those 10 tickets are just going to take longer than your sprint entails, and somebody just messed up the estimate. Well, the team just messed up the estimate, which happens because we're people developing really abstract things in software, and mistakes are going to happen. I feel like there's a degree of empathy that really needs to be had in Scrum teams. And I feel like in Scrum teams that I've been a part of in the past, not recently, thank the Lord, but in the past, there has been finger pointing and blame game being played as like, oh well, we failed the sprint because so and so didn't finish their tickets, and that's not healthy or productive in any regard, right? We as developers should be better than that. But Scrum is a team game.
Huh.
Yeah. Actually, the word scrum comes from rugby when people are like fighting over the rugby ball right away. I don't know. I have never even watched rugby. This is just what I learned.
Right.
And it comes from rugby because of the idea that two teams are fighting to control the ball together. Rugby experts in chat, let me know how that was not perfect, but that's more or less what I remember about that.
So what is this stuff about like a scrum master, or as you've been saying, like a scrum wizard?
Yeah. So in Scrum, there are roles. So there are the developers, the product owners, and the Scrum Master. And the Scrum Master's whole job is making sure that everybody follows the rules of Scrum. That is the entire role. That person can be the same person every time. I've heard of teams where one of the developers actually rotates into the Scrum Master position every sprint to kind of spread that load out. Um, but yeah, the Scrum Master's whole point is just to be like, here are the rules of Scrum. We should be following them. I mean, that's literally it's the entire goal.
So kind of like a person that like looks over your shoulder while you're developing and is like, you're not doing this right. Like that type of person?
That that is what it can be if it's a bad Scrum Master, Scrum Wizard, whatever. I like Scrum Wizard. I think it's a funny title because it brings these Scrum Masters down to earth a little bit sometimes. Some people get very bent out of shape if you don't call them Scrum Master, though. But yeah, if they're not a team player, if they're not a good Scrum Master, then yeah, they're looking over your shoulder like, well, you pointed that ticket as a 2, and you've been working on that for a week and a half. I guess it wasn't a 2, was it? And like that sucks. Again, we should be better than that. We should be empathetic to the fact that we're all humans, we're all developers, and everybody's got stuff going on. Good Scrum Masters are like at the end of the sprint, they'll be like, hey, we said that we deliver 30 points typically throughout a sprint, and we only delivered 24. What happened here? Right? They guide the discussion, and then if somebody's like, yeah, we don't have to point that, they have to be like, no, we literally do in Scrum. Otherwise, this whole idea of figuring out how we can estimate isn't going to work. Because if you have unpointed tasks, then you're doing work that isn't tracked.
So maybe like the benefit of like Scrum is just to be able to tell stakeholders more accurately when you could deliver a product.
That's exactly it. It gives you a really rigid, it sounds like a bad word, but it's not. It gives you a really rigid iteration of like, yeah, every 2 weeks you will see something from us, which is really cool. Like it definitely has its upsides. I think Scrum, if done correctly, can be unbelievably powerful, especially when you have stakeholders who are expecting something on a regular basis, as opposed to Kanban, where it's just stuff is getting fired out whenever you can. Neither is wrong. It just depends on your team, your project, and what y'all prefer.
Okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense. I could see where like why you would use one and why you would use another.
Mm-hmm.
You were saying they could get mixed though? Like how does that work? Or do they get
Oh, sorry, cut.
mixed?
They get what?
Can they get mixed? Like can you have like the ScrumBan?
Yeah, so some people will mix the two, and I don't think it's a bad idea at all. I think, like you said, there's a lot of benefit to having a sprint, right? But the idea of Kanban being, we're going to work for 2 weeks, and here's the stuff that we could potentially pick from. But at the end of 2 weeks, basically, whatever combination of cards we picked and moved across the board, we're going to deliver. Um, that's really kind of a nice combination that can work well for a lot of teams who are transitioning from one to the other or just see benefits in both. Like they like the Kanban style, but they have a client that every 2 weeks they want to see something. Like that can work really well too. The nice thing is when you mix the two, your team or really even just you as an independent developer can pick the bits and pieces that are going to make you most productive and make you ship good code. One of the cool things about Kanban that both of these technically have, both Scrum and Kanban technically have, but Kanban puts it at the forefront, is this idea of a work in progress limit. So one of Kanban's biggest strengths is that it can actually help you identify bottlenecks in the process. So typically a good way to view these work in progress limits is every column, you just take the number of people who can do things in that column. So if there's like a ready to develop column, you take all the developers in the team, multiply that number by like 1.5 or 2, and then you have your work in progress limit. So if there's 4 developers, your work in progress limit could be anywhere from 6 to 8. And the idea is if designers are moving stuff from the designing to ready to develop column, if there's ever more than 6 or 8 cards in there, you have a bottleneck because you don't have enough developers, right? You can identify that really quick. But the idea is with these work in progress limits, there can never be more than X number of cards in a given column. And the reason for that is that people over time have found out that the fewer cards you have in flight at any given time, the faster you get the cards that are in flight done, right? It's like if you throw somebody a ball, they can catch it. If you throw somebody like 2 tennis balls, like they can catch them. But if you throw somebody like 20 tennis balls, the odds are they're going to catch maybe one and then just get pelted by the rest of them. That's kind of the idea behind work in progress limits.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
So people like to take that idea from Kanban and move it into Scrum, and then you've still got ScrumBan, right? They like the idea of Scrum, but they're like, we also shouldn't have 30 cards in progress at the same time. That's not going to be very helpful.
So, I mean, like when you have companies that are like, "Hey, do you know Agile?" blah 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 blah. Like, why? Like, this doesn't seem like it would be that hard to learn. Like, it makes sense. Uh, I think like once you get onto a team, it would just be like one of those things that you learn a little bit and then you just, you do it. Why would that be something they would ask for beforehand?
So there, well, to be honest with you, I feel like a lot of places do it because it's a nice buzzword that HR can throw on the application. Um, that's kind of the reason why you end up with things like that. Another reason is that it is important. Like a lot of companies do actually see the benefits of Agile and request that the developers have experience with Agile before they work there.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people are like, that's hard to do because I don't have a job. Like I haven't done it. You can do Agile in your own projects. Like it's
Hmm.
a little harder because you do have to be a little more regimented and like that's why I always recommend Kanban for personal projects because then you can literally just pick whatever task you want to work on. You'd be like, yeah, I do Agile. I prefer Kanban, but I also know about Scrum. Boom, done. Question answered. You're good to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I find it's definitely more of an HR buzzword that an HR person puts onto the application than anything else.
So, like, if you were to use like Kanban by yourself on a
Mhm.
personal project, you have the. Wait, let me pull it back up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the wrong one. Whoops. Sorry. Um. So, like, if this were just to do, doing, and done, like, you would just
Mhm.
say, like, these are all the things that I need to do. And
Yep.
then you have one thing that you're doing, and then you have done. But, like, what is the benefit of doing that by yourself? Is this organization or?
So it can really help you organize your thoughts, especially if you're the kind of developer who is very ADD about what tasks I work on at any given time. Like I'll be halfway through a task, like, ooh, actually, this other one's more important. I should also work on this one, or I should work on these 10 other ones. And then, kind of like I said, once you have a bunch of stuff in flight, it gets really hard to actually finish those things. Um, Another thing that is kind of nice about doing something like Agile is that you are committing to deploying something as soon as it hits that done column, right? So
Oh,
you
okay.
gotta like you gotta really dedicate like this is good. Once this is done, I know this is done. And if deployment isn't your definition of done, if your definition of done is it's pushed up to the main branch, it's on my development or my staging server, like whatever it is, it you can look at this board and go, here are all the things I haven't done. Here are the couple of things that I'm doing. And I know for a fact, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that by my definition of done, all of these cards are finished. So you get this relief of not having to keep those done cards in memory anymore, in like your actual brain memory. And you can free that brain space up for other stuff. Some
So,
people even, and I typically like doing this, you can have a backlog full of all the stuff you want to do. And then you can say, like, for right now, these are like the important 5 things. You put those in your to-do column, but you don't have to do that. You can just make your to-do column like everything you could possibly want to do on your project.
so if you put something in the done column, that means you've pushed it.
So it means you have achieved your definition of done, which is another one of those like really stuffy agile terms that basically means the team, in this case, you have agreed on what done means.
Okay.
So like for me, as on my personal portfolio, I'm obviously not going to push that until it's done because I'd have to replace my current site because I'm just doing a full replacement. So my definition of done is if I were to accidentally get pushed today to my to like my actual site repository, the things in this column would be completely finished. Like I just the other day finished adding featured posts to my homepage. It's like now featured posts are completely done. And for me, that's done functionally, that's done design wise, and it's done responsively. So it works from mobile all the way up to ultra wide desktops. That's my definition of done for that project. But every project and is going to have a different definition of done that everybody has to agree on.
Okay. So before you begin a project, and if you're using like Kanban or an agile process or whatever it's called,
Mm-hmm.
um, you need to decide what done means.
Yep. Which sounds like such a weird, stupid thing to have to determine. But people have tons of different definitions of done.
You know,
Like I've worked with developers who are like, it's not done till it's all the way on a server, or it's not done until like, it's pretty much good. People will test it. It's basically done.
so I think you may know this, but I studied philosophy in college. Um,
I think I did know that.
and one of the biggest things in philosophy is you're making arguments or like logical arguments and determining the truth value of the premises, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but a lot of arguments people have are because they don't agree on a definition. like if they think that like an apple is a tennis ball and someone else thinks an apple is an apple, and then they're basing their argument on like that apples are tennis balls and the other person doesn't agree with that and doesn't know that they don't agree with it, then they're never gonna like come to like a consensus or be like, oh yes, you've convinced me in this way, because they don't have the same thing that, like the same premise they're working from. So like it would make
Right.
sense that you would need to define done. For I think for other people it might be like, okay, that's weird. But like it makes a lot of sense to me. Like you just define your terms. Just generally in life, that's what I have to say. My little spicy rant.
Yeah. You're right though. I mean, it would solve, well, maybe not solve, it would probably prevent a lot of issues, even just in software, right? In general.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes, and one thing I like about this is I have I have a notepad beside my desk, and I'm like, oh, I need to get these things done today, and then like check it off. And I really like checking things off. It gives me like, I don't know, I like it a lot. But I have like the Southern Paiute project, the dictionary.
Hmm. Yeah.
On the README, I have, okay, these are all the things I still need to do, and then like I'll check them off once they're there, but like I have to go all the way to the README. So I
Hmm.
could see it being like helpful in that way, like, oh yes, these are still all the things that we need to do. These are all still the things we're still doing, right? And these are things that
Yeah.
are done. That makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense.
exactly. And it's really cool because, and I know they just launched a total redo of it and I haven't actually looked at it, but GitHub has GitHub projects per repository. It's a Kanban board. Like it's
Ooh.
literally this, but in GitHub. And honestly, I would probably use GitHub's over Trello's just because it's one less place you have to go, you know?
Oh, I never knew what the project thing was. I never looked at it.
Yeah. We just started using it on a project I'm on like a month or two ago. And it's really cool because so since we work on a team, we use pull requests to request that code be pulled into the main branch. But you can actually wire up those GitHub projects to when a pull request is opened, it like moves to a certain column, and then when it's closed, it moves to done or whatever. So you can actually wire up a whole workflow where it just kind of moves the cards for you, which is really cool.
Hmm.
And then you have a really active look at what's to do, what's in progress, what needs testing, and what's done.
Yeah, that maybe that's something I should be using or something I
Yeah,
should have looked into at this point, but it's okay, better late
whatever.
than never.
That's not what people use GitHub for, you know?
Right. I use GitHub to show that I have lots of green squares, so clearly sophisticated and important.
Oh yes, of course. The mighty green square.
Like I said, I like checking things off. It's just another like checking things off. Like, oh yes, look, another green box, you know?
Oh yeah. No, I definitely cheat on those little green boxes. So I have so like I said, I take all my notes to Obsidian, and there's a plugin for Obsidian that'll just commit and push all notes that I write up to GitHub, and so I just have it in a private repo, and all my private repository contributions are turned on. So I'm like, there's green squares everywhere. I'm like, I'm not actually like pushing to GitHub every day. That's not happening.
Wait, so like what notes are you taking in Obsidian? Like are they
So
work related?
so I actually have a separate. They call them vaults. I have a
Okay.
separate vault for work notes typically, just because like some of our clients are under NDA, so I don't want to like
Uh-huh.
mix the two. But so I use this methodology called the second brain. It's called the Para method. So basically, I have 4 folders for projects, areas, resources, and an archive. And the basic idea is you don't organize things by their category necessarily. You organize them by how quickly you're going to use them. So like every active, like so for this tonight, I had a project called Agile Stream, and all the notes that I was just thinking of, like as I was thinking about what we were going to talk about, I was just putting into that project. And now that the project after tonight's going to be done, I can move it into my archive because I'm not likely to use it again. But if I ever have to talk about Agile or somebody asks me a question about it, I still have the notes and I know where to find them. So it's super
Hmm.
cool. I really like it. Tiago Forte is the guy who came up with the methodology. He's fantastic. My brain has been uh, much less packed since I started using it.
Much improved. That would I
Yeah.
have so many like random notes all over my computer that I just like I forgot they existed, but they were important enough to keep, but also like I don't know what they are or where they are really because I'm not that organized.
Right. Well, and that was my problem, and that's why. And it's nice. There's a whole thing. I won't go too deep into it because it's like I mean, it's literally a whole book on it. But
Oh.
Um, it's nice because it puts them all in Obsidian, and Obsidian search, even like Notion. I don't know if you use Notion, but Notion's also a good one, or Evernote. The search system's really good. So then I just like search. I'll forget that I've taken these agile notes in like a year or two, but somebody will be like, I'll have a new person come into Kirschbaum, and I'll be the one responsible for onboarding them. I'm like, hey, what kind of agile do you guys use? And I'm like, I don't know. And I'll type agile into Obsidian, all these notes will pop up, which will be really helpful.
Mm, okay. Well,
Yeah,
maybe I'll end up using that.
I love it. Big fan.
So back to Agile. Also, Wormhole wants to know if you're wearing a Laravel shirt.
Heck yeah, I am. Whoop whoop. Gotta rep the
Alex,
framework.
Alex is a huge Laravel fan.
Oh my gosh. Literally made my entire career off of it.
Did you really?
Yeah, I have only, well, that's not entirely true. I have always been employed as a Laravel developer. I've done other development too for work, but I mean, even the company I work at now, Kirschbaum, we're Laravel partners. We're gold sponsors for Laracon coming up. Like, we love Laravel. Big Laravel fans.
Okay. Yep, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go, Wormhole. What are your
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on people saying PHP is dead? I think we talked about this before, actually.
We probably have. I can be really brief. It's not. Um, People who say PHP is dead typically used PHP back in the PHP 4 and 5 days, or have been burnt by a WordPress site at some point in their careers. PHP is actually a really good language to use. Um, it can do a lot. It's also super easy to deploy and develop. And it scales unbelievably well. People tend to say it doesn't scale super well because it's um, basically every time somebody requests to the server, you have one PHP process that handles it instead of having a lot of different threads or whatever. Um, if you don't know what those mean, doesn't matter. Basically, people say PHP doesn't scale very well. Laravel has an entire serverless framework for PHP. So I just develop my app like normal, and I say Vapor deploy go, and it pushes it up to AWS's Lambda service. It's basically a bunch of serverless functions that run on somebody else's computer, and PHP will scale infinitely. There's a competitor to Google Analytics called Fathom. Their whole system is Laravel, and they scale to millions of users and billions of hits a day. So when people say PHP is dead, I'm like, clearly not. I mean, Apple is now hiring Laravel developers because they're using Laravel for their tools. So, people can keep saying that, and that's totally fine because more work for the PHP developers.
Right. Whenever I think of the word fathom, I think of Megamind. Have you seen Megamind?
Yes.
It's unfathomable without
Unfathom.
fathom.
I need to go watch that movie again. That's been a long time. When did that come out?
Oh, I don't know, like
Like a while ago, right?
2012 or something. I
Gosh.
watched it last year, and it's weird how like when you're adult and you're not watching these sorts of movies all the time, it like makes like this like huge imprint on your mind. You're like, do you remember when I watched that 6 months ago? I'm still quoting it again, like, and that's
Right?
how I feel. I watched it last year and I'm still quoting it. So
It's a good movie.
apparently in 2010,
Gosh. That's
yeah,
unbelievable. I
it
can't,
really
like,
is.
it's 12 years old.
I was 12 when it came out.
That's wild. How, yeah, I would have been 15, I think, if my math is right.
It's weird. It's
That's
weird.
crazy. I hate that. I hate that so much.
It's
Uh,
weird to have like good memory of the 2010s and them actually being like 10 years in the
right?
past. It's fine. It's fine.
It's I so for like the last, we don't have to go too far on this, but for like the last 10 years I worked with high schoolers teaching them how to do like video production, audio production, stuff like that. And when they started telling me they were born post 2000, I was just like, "Oh, I feel like I'm ancient now. This is ridiculous. You were born when?"
I always
It's
forget that people who were born after 2003 aren't like five, you know?
right. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Babies, exactly. Babies, literal babies. Anyone born after 2000, infant.
I think they were talking about us, but yes.
No,
It's
I'm not a baby.
it's weird getting older is what I would say. Maybe I'm a baby, but
Yeah.
it's weird getting older.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you tell someone about I don't know who we're talking about audio
I
compression?
The high schoolers probably. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. We did everything from like how set up shots for like actual like film shots, all the way through cutting the shots together, color grading, fixing the audio and adjusting audio, doing all that sort of stuff, all the way to actually like showing like how do you show these things. So it was really fun, good time.
okay. Well, we went on a little side rant, which
Yes,
I mean,
always. Oops.
honestly, those things deserve to be talked about. But like agile, that's what we're here for, right?
Yes, we're here for Agile.
So,
Chat.
chat, stop it. No, I don't even think it was chat. I think it was me because we said the word fathom. So,
That's
oh,
true. Well, we were talking about PHP, so we were already on a tangent.
that's true.
Oh
Um,
dear.
so like, are there any other like agile methodologies like you think people should know about or that are commonly used?
I would say probably not. If you bump into one of the companies that uses, I literally can't even remember the names of these other ones. They can't fault you for not knowing that when it's 1% of the developer population that uses it. Those are typically the companies like, do you have experience with literally any agile methodology? And you'd be like, yes. And I'm like, great, we'll teach you this one. So, but they all, again, they're all kind of the same. They just iterate in some way, shape, or form. So Kanban, the iterations are moving the card all the way across the board. In Scrum, it's the sprints, right? It's every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks. But if you can grasp the fact that you'll be building software in cycles, then you've got Agile pretty much taken care of.
Agile, in one sentence, building software in cycles.
Yeah, pretty much.
Tell that to the interviewer. You're like, yes, I build software in cycles,
Yes,
aka
software in cycles.
agile. What is XP? What are we talking about there?
So there is extreme programming. Admittedly, I learned about it like back in college. It's basically the takeaway that I got from learning about it in college, and this is probably not entirely correct, is that if you do Scrum but you don't follow all of the rules, so even if you follow all but one rule, you're actually doing extreme programming, because extreme programming is just kind of do whatever in iterations. I'm probably grossly misrepresenting that, but I've never worked at a place where it was used.
Mm,
So yeah, apparently it's really loved though. Like the people who use it really love it. So definitely worth looking into. I just don't know anything about it.
seems like chat loves it too. So,
Oh yeah, Chad is loving on it.
yay, extreme
Robodom.
programming.
Yeah, yeah.
It sounds like extreme sports.
Right. It's always funny to be like, "What do you use?" I use extreme programming.
What do you
Like
do?
really
I
aggressive.
I have my laptop strapped to my body and then I type on it as I bungee jump.
Extreme.
That would be
That's
extreme
amazing.
programming. Yeah. There's also
That's the one.
lean, Wormhole says. Do you know lean?
Oh yeah, I don't, but that was one of the ones that was like 2% of people use this, so I didn't look it up.
Mm,
But there is lean that does exist. Um, yeah,
yeah. Well, that's fine. I feel like I've heard the names Kanban and Scrum tossed around. So like, and Agile. Yep.
yeah, they're definitely the most. Scrum is definitely the most popular. And then some combination of Scrum and Kanban is next, and then Kanban is the third most popular.
I wonder why?
I think Scrum just got really popular in the Valley, like in Silicon Valley. People were like, yes, this is the way we're going to do software. And everybody kind of just fell in line with it. Kind of the way that Ruby on Rails got really popular. Everybody in the Valley was like, we're going to build our apps with Ruby on Rails. So everybody else was like, well, now we all have to build our apps with Ruby on Rails. Like if the Silicon Valley is doing it, I would say that's probably why. But I also think it's good for development teams who work for companies that deliver software products, but also for agencies like Kirschbaum. We use Scrum for some of our projects because it lets those stakeholders have that regular cadence of delivery, which is which is really nice and easy to market and easy for the business team to then have like, okay, for this 2 weeks, you're going to sell the features from the last sprint.
So like so you can like change you can use both, I guess. So does your I can't even say words. I'm so sorry. Does your company do it like on a project by project basis? Be like, ah, yes, Scrum would work better for this. Kanban would work better for this.
That's exactly it. And sometimes one of the things we do at Kirschbaum is called team augmentation. So companies will hire us and say, hey, can you loan us 3 developers to come work on this development team? And so sometimes we just get put into a project where they're already using Kanban or already using Scrum. But if we are coming on to take over the project, or we're making a greenfield application, which is where somebody comes to us with an idea and then we just build the whole thing. Yeah, depending on the type of project, we will pick which one seems to work better for that project. And depending on whether we're building up a brand new project and there are no stakeholders, but there will be later, we can start with Kanban and then move to Scrum once there's more regular tasks that can be done.
Okay. It Kanban also could be like more maintenance, I think, like maintenance based if you already have like a production app.
Yeah. IT help desks love Kanban. So like as people report in like bug tickets, that's exactly it. Just pick the most important one off, work on it, and just keep going. Because otherwise you're waiting 2 weeks for like a bug to be fixed, which kind of sucks.
Right. That makes sense. Lord Super Astro says, do you report the cadence to account slash or manager slash stakeholders and hold the team up to? I can't say words today. Account if they slip up. Okay, I'm just gonna stop talking now. That comment.
So one of the cool things about Agile and Scrum in particular is that it's really important for the stakeholders to be a part of the process. So they're a part of the process when determining what the cadence is going to be in the first place. Um, so yes, technically we report the cadence to them, but they're also part of the agreement of what the cadence is going to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hologram wants to know what you work as currently.
What I work as, so I am a senior developer and a project lead for Kirschbaum.
There you go.
Whoop, whoop.
Is there
Thanks.
is there anything else like do you think I should know about Agile? Or are there any other questions anyone has about it?
So I think one thing that, let me see if I can find it. As much as Atlassian can kind of drive me up a wall because of Jira and all this sort of stuff, they have this thing called the Agile Coach. I'll drop it in chat. Where they actually walk you through Scrum and Kanban. And it's actually very well done. The videos are a little cheesy because they're, corporate, whatever, but they break down every little facet of it. And they do not take long to go through the whole thing. So would definitely recommend checking that out. Chat too, if you have questions, I would definitely recommend checking this out. Like, I may not love Atlassian software all the time. However, this is actually really good.
Okay. Yeah. I will think about reading that, most likely not, but I will think about it.
Well, the nice thing is it's not just reading, there's some videos too. So you can like put them on in the background and just like absorb the knowledge. Cause that works. That's what I do.
Oh, what is it called? Everyone says osmosis, and it's not actually
It's
osmosis. It's
not
like I don't know if
diffusion.
diffusion. Anyway,
Yeah.
by diffusion.
Did you do that thing where maybe this is just me being me, but like I remember before tests, like in middle school and high school, I'd like sleep with a textbook on my pillow, be like, just in case, I'm like gonna diffuse the knowledge from this book into my head. Chat, is that just me or
I
did
did
somebody else
not, but
do that? I definitely did that. And I don't know, maybe it worked. Who knows?
see, I didn't study until I got to college, and then I got to college and I failed all of my first tests, and I was like, oh shit. And then I
Oh.
had to learn how to study, so
Yeah, that's a hard one.
okay, we got some questions. Could we do an
Okay.
agile workflow with a scrum master or an agile coach?
Um oh, without. I see down there without.
Oh,
Um
without, sorry. I'm
yeah, yeah. That's good. I was looking down, like, I don't know what that means. So without an agile coach, yeah, definitely for sure. You don't need an agile coach. It's a very, very optional part of Kanban, and they're usually good if you're trying to onboard a team that doesn't know anything about agile. A Scrum Master, however, you do have to have if you're doing Scrum by the book. You do have to have one.
Or the Scrum gods will strike you down.
I mean, pretty much. Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Okay. How do you know how exactly the logic behind the Kanban board works?
um, like how you move stuff across the board or like what the columns are.
Hologram,
I think,
clarify if you can. Oh, there we go. The drag and drop feature. Are you talking
like,
about like the programming?
yeah, because if it's a program, I'm pretty sure there's a drag and drop JavaScript API you can use. I'm pretty sure. I don't tend to do a lot of drag and drop, to be honest with you. I want to, I should, but I don't.
What would you say is the difference between iterative, waterfall, and Scrum?
I think so. Iterative waterfall to me is the foundations of full diverse team agile. So when you are working on a project that's using agile, the idea is as things come up, like in a pure, very agile way, as new features want to be introduced or as bugs come up, for each of those during the iteration, you'll go through, okay, what are the requirements for this card? Let's analyze those requirements. Okay, let's do the design. And that's not just the UI design, that's also the software design. Okay, let's code it. Okay, let's test it. Okay, at the end of the sprint, we'll deploy it and then we'll maintain it. So iterative waterfall kind of forms the backbone of everything. Scrum is just one of the agile methodologies that you can use that does that iterative development.
Okay. How many slot/categories, like to do, doing, and done, do you find ideal? I think you said that a little earlier, but
Yeah, so this is one of those things where it really depends on the project. So for if it's just me, it's gonna be to do, doing, and done. Maybe a backlog column if I end up having like 100 cards and I'm like, okay, I need to like focus on these 5 cards first. I'll just have a backlog column full of stuff, and then I'll pull my favorite 5 over to do. Um, but as the team scales up, or as you have other things you want to do, like if you have a dedicated QA team, quality assurance team, you could add a column for testing. And then once the development has been finished, you just move it into the QA column. And then once QA is done, they can move it into the done column because the definition of done is developed and tested or whatever. So it's not so much what you find ideal personally. Like you can definitely have your personal preferences, right? But it's what works best with the project. The beautiful thing about Kanban and to some extent Scrum, just a little less flexible, is that these things can change and they're meant to change, right? As you discover new things as a team that would optimize the workflow, you should add them. You should try them out. You should experiment with them, just like you're experimenting with some of these tickets, right? In the iterative methodology, because just like moving this development work across a board in Kanban or Scrum is iterative, actually keeping up your Scrum board or your Kanban board is also iterative.
right.
Yeah.
We switched. Oh, Homie says it was helpful. Great.
Good.
Super Aster says, what do you think about test-driven development?
I like test-driven development. However, with the caveat that I think test-driven development can actually get in the way of development sometimes. Um, I love more than anything else being sure that the code that I'm writing matches up with the requirements that are set forth. However, in a realistic world, requirements aren't always so perfectly set that I can go ahead and write a test right away. Sometimes I'm just like hacking code together just to see like, is this feature even possible? Like, is this something that we can even do? And then I end up writing the test kind of in parallel with the feature. But if you can write your tests beforehand, see them fail, then write the code and see them green, I think that's fantastic. I think it's a great way to do development. I honestly love um, so when I'm like trying stuff, rather than writing all the code in the right places and seeing if it'll work, more often than not, I just write it into a test file, like just all the random code, and I just run that test over and over again because I'm already in my terminal for all my development, so I can just pop over to a new terminal window, run the test really quick, and see if it works, rather than having to like open up the app, log in, click to this page, click to that page, do this dropdown, submit the form. Sometimes it's just easier to write a test, so I kind of accidentally do TDD in that regard. But overall, I think it's great. In general, tests, super important. The more confidence that you can have when you're deploying and making changes to your application, the better.
We actually did test-driven development on this channel with Dan Kinkota a month or two
Love
ago.
Dan.
Yeah, they're amazing. Um, Hologram says, do you think we need a master's degree, etc., to become a CTO? Are there even
No,
CTOs without masters?
nope, not at all. My last boss was the CTO of a company, and he did not have his master's. And he was fantastic. He was so good. Actually, one of my favorite people I've ever worked with.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
I feel like degrees just in tech is just like, you know, they don't
Yeah,
super matter.
they don't. I think they can definitely be a good leg up. And some companies do require a master's degree or a PhD or whatever for certain roles. But overall, and there's a whole thing. But I think overall, degrees are great if you need or want the collegiate structure to learn. Like I definitely needed that back when I was in college. I was not a very self-driven learner at the beginning, so like I needed the regimented, like we're going to learn these things, and then we're going to have some quizzes, and then we're going to have a final exam, and then you should know it. Like I needed that rigidity and structure when I was starting college. Over time, I've become way more self-driven. But it was important for me. So that's why I have a degree. But I also know I work with a ton of people who have degrees in other things or don't have degrees at all. And some of them could code circles around most people. It's more about what you can do, right? What you can prove that you can do. If you can prove it because you have a nice shiny piece of paper from a cool institution that says you know the thing you know, then great. If you have a really cool side project you've been working on, to me, that's just as great.
And hologram, it definitely is dependent on like what country you live in. So like Alex's point of view and
Mm,
mine are both like from America. So it definitely could be different in different countries.
that's a great point.
What is BDD? People are mentioning BDD up in chat.
Uh, Behavior driven development.
Uh,
Admittedly, I don't know a ton about it. It is actually pretty big in the Laravel community. A lot of people like BDD, but also a lot of people like TDD, and a lot of people just like cowboy coding, and they're just like, we're gonna write code, and that's kind of all they do. But um, yeah, BDD is an interesting concept that I really do want to look into. I just haven't.
how do you think pair programming affects cadence?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good question. So as far as cadence goes, I mean, I assume it would slow down cadence, right? However, you get the benefit of having more than one set of eyes on any given piece of code. So testing typically becomes quicker and easier. You usually have fewer bugs in the code because you're able to catch some of those edge cases just by having another person who's not typing look at the code. But for me, it's the idea of having more than one person have ownership of the code. I'm a big lover of the bus principle, where if I am the only person who built the infrastructure for this application, all the servers and all the load balancers and DNS routing, everything. If I'm the only person who built that and I walk across Main Street tomorrow and get hit by a bus and die, we have a problem. Well, I don't have a problem. I'm dead. But the company then has a big problem. Like they don't know how to do this. And somebody is certainly smart enough to figure it out. But the idea of the bus principle is that you always have a backup. You always have a second person who is capable of owning the code that you've written. So I love pair programming. I think it's a fantastic way to ensure that your code is tested, maintainable, and just known by more people. But it does slow down cadence, like by its definition, right? You're having two people work on the same thing. Now, that said, if it's a really hard problem to solve, like it's a really difficult feature, sometimes it can actually speed up cadence because you have two brains working on this hard piece of logic. Because mental fatigue is a real thing, and pair programming can sometimes slow down mental fatigue. Depends on your personality, though. If you're not a kind of person who likes to sit and like talk and chat about code while you're writing code, it could be a little draining.
I feel like I'm very like High School Musical, when they're like, we're all in this together. That's like how I am. I'm like, yeah, let's do it together. Yeah, everybody. I mean, I've never worked at a company, so there's that. But like, I feel like we should. I don't know. I like pair programming, so.
I love it. Admittedly, I didn't know where you were going with that, but you landed the plane. That was awesome.
Thank
I
you, thank
love
you,
that.
thank you. Needed to sneak some High
Um,
School Musical in here.
I mean, I'm game.
I have you seen any of the bad lip readings I've shown on stream before?
I haven't seen him on your stream, but I love bad lip readings.
Have you
Oh my
have
gosh.
you seen the High School Musical one?
Yes, it's been a long time. It's been a long time.
I watched it last week and it was so funny. It's like because they call Troy Chorky. I don't know. I'm like a child. That's funny to me.
I listen, I could sit and watch bad lip readings all day.
Same,
They're so good.
same.
They're so talented too. Like the people who actually make those, because I'm like, they're actually saying these words.
Okay, so well, I don't know if I
Wow, wow,
actually
wow, wow, wow.
posted it yet, but on my YouTube, I'm trying to post the last stream. And I was like, I muted myself for the first part of the stream because, of course I did. And I was like, what if I do like bad lip reading to myself? And so I started trying to do it, and I was like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm saying. And I was like, well, maybe and then like it just like what I came up with. Like I did two sentences, and I was like, screw this, I'm done. Um, but I did two sentences, and they had nothing to do with each other. And the bad lip readings like make sense, and they look
Yeah.
like they're saying that. It's just respect, mad respect.
Mad respect. They're so good. Oh my gosh, they're so talented. Um, Also, I have to call out Blackboard's comment about showing off your NeoVim config. It's my favorite part of pair programming too. People are like, "What editor are you using?" I'm like, "It's NeoVim."
We've had that discussion here before. Like a bunch of y'all senior developers are like, "Oh yes, Vim," and that will be the topic of a future stream, I think, at some point. But
Ooh.
but for now, VS Code.
Hey, VS Code's great. You could do a whole heck of a lot of stuff in VS Code.
Can you pair program or like look at each other's like files in Vim or NeoVim?
Yeah, there's ways to do it. There's actually a ton of ways to do it, just depending on what you want to do. But yeah, there are ways. I've admittedly never done that because I typically just use some sort of screen sharing app like Zoom or Tuple. Tuple's fantastic. If you haven't heard of it, it is paid and it's very expensive, but some companies use it. It's awesome. It is like the best pair programming software I have ever used.
Yeah, I don't I don't know anything about Tuple, nor do I have money to know anything, but maybe in the future.
No. Yeah, no, for sure.
um, what's your hot take on Tailwind?
Love it. Have never been more productive writing, or I was gonna say writing front end code. That's not really it. I've never been more productive styling elements on the front end, I guess. But my favorite thing about Tailwind is that it allows me. So Tailwind is less to me of a CSS framework, and it's a CSS framework because it lets me build out this whole design system that then I am now going to use across the entire application. I love that. I know there's other tools that will do that, obviously, but Tailwind is my favorite. I really like it.
I started learning Tailwind and then I stopped, but maybe I'll pick it up again. We used Tailwind and then we like had like a text box and we had it like spinning. It was great. Good time.
Nice. I do
Doesn't
love the spin.
you feel like a magic person? You're like, look, I can do this.
Right?
You know?
Sometimes I will uh, tell people who don't know Tailwind, like, yeah, just like copy and paste this class string and like put it on the body, it'll fix your problem. And I'll add like what is it, animate spin in there or whatever. And then they'll be like, what is going on?
It's like
I'm the worst.
when you're in like elementary school and you turn the school computers for the display to be upside down.
Yes.
Yep. I never figured out how to do that, so that's fine. But it was cool.
Yeah.
Um, Sounds like we're talking about rebase or merge. Do you prefer
Oh
rebase or
boy.
merge?
Um, I don't really care that much. Merge typically is safer overall, in from my experience. But there's some who really like rebase, and I totally see um, the why rebase is a valid good thing. Um, for me, it really doesn't matter. It's kind of whatever the I can work with whatever the team prefers. So with rebase, you don't get the little merge commits. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. I'm kind of indifferent.
Does anyone have any more agile questions? We're getting a little random here.
We are getting a little random. AW merge, but once a year rebase.
Got some.
Rebase and squash. Yeah.
This element has 45 classes and there's 50 tips. True.
Squash and merge. Yeah, it's funny. Everybody has like their favorite way to like merge or rebase branches to main, and I just whatever. Yeah, whatever the team wants. I'm here for it.
Look, Dom, we both drank.
Ooh.
Yeah, redeemed a drink right then.
Yeah, got a 2 for 1.
Also, Dom, you need to learn more about Agile, and then we'll have more questions. I feel like we covered everything. Like, yeah,
We definitely covered a lot. I will say it's one thing to like know about agile, and it's definitely another thing to actually do it. Like put yourself through the motions.
yeah.
So
That doesn't sound like it should be hard to try and start implementing.
no, definitely not. Again, Kanban was literally designed to fit into existing workflows. So you should be able to implement it into exactly how you're doing things right now, just with sticky notes and columns.
Um, Thoughts on data structures and interviews?
Depends on if that's useful to the job. I think if you're applying for a job where you need to know data structures and algorithms, same thing applies, then yeah, they should be testing those and quizzing you on those because you need them for the job. If you're, applying for a job where that's not even a little bit useful, I think it's kind of ridiculous to expect those in an interview. I would love more relevant interviews for the job you're applying for.
I wish people would just be like, "Wow, I really vibe well with you." All right, let's go. Because I've
Yeah.
it would be nice. It would be nice to just vibe and then learn.
I mean, seriously, I think, and I won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but that's why I think that, excuse me, jobs like apprenticeships are really important because then it is about, hey, do we vibe with you? And then if so, sure, yeah, come on board. We'll teach you literally everything we know, right? That's my whole shtick with apprenticeships is that by the end of it, like somebody should be able to look at you and how you write code and be like, oh, I know who your mentor is. Obviously, like within the organization, somebody's not going to know a random programmer, but the idea is there, right? Like the person who is your mentor should pass down as much of the knowledge that they have and prepare you to take a job either at that company or somewhere else. Like I think apprenticeships are a very important but missing piece of how we go into tech. Because right now it's literally get the big green cracking the coding interview book, read through all of it, commit all of it to memory, go do 100 interviews, you get a job, and then you forget about the stuff you learned. I feel like that's not very effective.
Yeah. It's very much like I don't know how I feel like at least the American school system is um structured just like oh yeah, if you pass the test then you're good, but you can just like memorize and not remember anything and that's how I always did it, And I was great at that,
Yeah.
but I don't remember anything, so
Right. Right. That's exactly it.
um let's see. For front end devs, front or data structures and algorithms, I think doesn't really make sense, right? In interviews.
It depends on the work you're doing. You can still use data structures and algorithms on the front end. It really does. It just depends on what you're doing. Not every company is allowed to pull in whatever NPM packages that you want kind of willy-nilly. Sometimes it has to go through a really long process of acceptance. And sometimes they're just like, yeah, we can't pull this package to do a binary sort of all these things in your JavaScript array. And sometimes you just have to write that yourself. So sometimes it is relevant, but sometimes it's not.
Is behavior-driven development like part of Agile? I think that's basically what the question was asking. Like, is it like always in Agile or necessarily in Agile?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, it's kind of like asking, is test-driven development part of Agile? If that is the way you develop, then yeah, it's part of Agile because that's how you're actually doing the development work within each iteration. So I guess on that level, yes, but I wouldn't call it like a principle of Agile. Like I've been a part of teams way long ago at this point that did Agile, did the iterations and everything, and never wrote a single test. So wouldn't recommend. Definitely would not recommend. But I think they're separate things, but definitely related.
Any other questions about Agile, anyone?
Yeah.
Before we move into React?
Woo.
Nothing yet, but there is always a lag, I feel like, when you're
Yeah,
streaming
definitely.
versus the chat.
Yeah.
Very good with people plus okay coder equals agile superhero.
Yeah. Sure. I think you have to be good with people you have to be like decent with people to be a successful programmer. That might be my hot take for the night.
I always like I didn't ever study computer science in school because like I didn't like understand the people who were in the programs very well, and I didn't feel like they were very good with people. So I feel like there are a lot of people in tech that aren't, but like
Mm.
maybe working in like companies, I don't know, makes you get better with people. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who get anxious around other folks or who just haven't learned how to be like super social people. And you know what? That's okay. I think for me, because you are pretty on point with some of the stereotypes about computer science. That's what my degree is in. And I got hissed at by a guy one time when I was introducing
Hissed?
myself. Yeah, like a cat. You know what? Might have been having a bad day. Might have made him anxious because I am a little overbearing with my hellos and how are yous. So like I think the key here to being a successful developer is being able to be good with people, as in like you can work on a team, you can show empathy towards folks. I think it's really important. A lot of people don't have that, and the world still turns. So I'm not going to say it's a mandatory thing, but I think I think if folks were more empathetic and more willing to work with folks and meet people where they're at, the development community would be a much better place. I think I'll leave it at that. But you had no tuna, and that was rude. Oh my gosh.
Wait, what? Just
Just the last comment. That's
wait.
amazing.
What is the
Uh,
context behind this that I don't understand?
hiss like a cat. I
Oh,
didn't have any tuna.
oh.
Wow.
I get you. Um, Hologram said, "What are your thoughts on people bashing technologies in general on stream or YouTube?" I know Bowles' opinions about this, but
Yeah.
let's hear yours.
I think being able to give valid constructive criticism is a huge skill to have. I think there's a line to be drawn between straight bashing on a technology and giving actual like helpful, thoughtful criticism. Um, I think it's easy to walk across the line back and forth because we're humans and we get like we get kind of engulfed in the rant sometimes. But I think in general, like I'll joke and be like, "Wow, React is my least favorite front end framework out of all the ones that I know." And that's fine. It is. But I also followed up by saying, but you know what? There's a lot of dang good software written in React. It's unbelievable. And the ecosystem is fantastic. Some people say like, PHP, wow, that's a crappy, borderline out of date, irrelevant language. That's a fine opinion to have, but I don't think that people should be just straight up bashing folks on the internet in any capacity, like technologies or other people. Like, I think, again, developers should in general try to put themselves in the shoes of other folks. And again, constructive criticism is so important. The world wouldn't get better if we didn't give actual feedback to people. I follow, I think his name's Theo. He's the guy who makes Ping, not GD,
Oh
Ping or
yeah.
whatever. He is just bluntly truthful to like a very sharp point. But you know what? He's always very genuine and like, these are the things that I see that are wrong, and I'm bringing them to light in a fair way. Like, he will give things a fair shake. And he's definitely gotten better about that. The more I've watched him, the more I've seen of his stuff. And I really respect the guy because he's not afraid to give his opinion on things. He's not afraid to call things out and be like, yeah, like that was a really crappy thing that person did. And he's like, and I'm disappointed because you could have done this, in X, Y, and Z better of a way. But he's not just outright bashing me like, man, this guy sucks. And like, you should just forget talking to him. Or, man, that technology is the worst. I can't believe you idiots use Svelte. Who does that? React is the best. Like, there's that line that I think you have to walk.
It's funny. A bunch of people will like sometimes just like pop in chat and be like, you're using JavaScript or like you're using X technology. Why are you doing that? You should be using Y technology. And it's really funny because it's just like, dude, like, okay. But also, like, I'm just trying to learn it. I'm just trying to use it. I'm not like, I think there's a place for like constructive feed. I cannot speak. Constructive criticism. Um, as long as it's like part of where the conversation was like going, you know, like
Yeah.
like today we weren't talking about whether agile sucked. We were talking about what it was.
Right.
So
Right. And I see people saying in chat that like, you know, like Theo has an ego, but he can back it up at least. And that's true. And again, I'm not going to say like everything he says is perfect. And, he's never, ever bashed a technology because at some point, I'm sure we all have because, we screw up. We don't think about other people. It's really easy to think about ourselves first. I mean, I'm guilty of that. Everybody's guilty of that. So I'm not saying the things he says are perfect. I just know the last couple of things that I've watched from him, like, oh yes, these are actually very like level-headed arguments for and against certain technologies. And that's good. Nobody's perfect. I'm not expecting anybody to be perfect. That's why I think we could also use a dose of like empathetic forgiveness in the industry as well. Of like, if somebody does something stupid and they apologize and they're like genuinely sorry for the things they do, then great. Like, let's move on. Let's keep rolling. But I think you're right, Rufy. I think you're 100% right. Like, at some point, people pop it in and be like, oh, JavaScript sucks. It's like, okay, well, that's really helpful. Even if it is just like, wow, you're using React. React, it sucks. You should use Svelte. I mean, that's cool, but what if you're more productive in React? Then you probably should use React.
yeah.
At some point, it's less about the technology. And this is the same argument with PHP. It's less about the technology you use and more about the quality of the product you can create.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
just my 2 cents, I guess.
Yeah. We're still talking about this chat this streamer in chat, looks like.
Yeah.
Agile rocks. There we go. Any other
I agree
agile
with that.
questions? That is not even what we're talking about at this point. But like last call, and then we're gonna move to React. And it's okay if you don't like React, as we were just talking about. We're just trying to learn it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
learn it. I'll say that.
Well, you and me both. I feel like there's like always more to dig into with React. I feel like the whole just goes on forever.
Well, I feel like that's all of tech, every technology,
Yeah, that's true.
never done. And you'll always
That's
have
very true.
someone who'll be like, yes, I'm better, and here's how you do it better. And you're like, yes, okay, all right.
All right.
I could
Cool.
learn from that, I guess.
Yep. Yep. Wow, hologram going right in with the Going right in with the banger of a controversy.
Okay, well,
That,
sorry.
oh, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, let's start doing that, but let's have like a 5-minute break first.